Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first offering of Middletown's Parent University. This is a series of 30-minute presentations available to our community where we go over topics that are timely and relevant to your child's education. Tonight, we're very happy to have Angela Sophia Mera with us. Angela is one of our elementary supervisors of curriculum and instruction, and she's here this evening to talk to you about the new assessments that we are running in Middletown this year, which include iReady and DIBELS 8. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Angela, and she will be presenting for the next 25 minutes or so.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Mero. I am one of the district's supervisors of elementary curriculum and instruction. And as Dr. Kerrigan said, tonight we're going to be talking about some new assessments that we've been implementing in the district, that of iReady and DIBELS 8th edition. In this presentation, we will discuss various types of assessment, examples of assessments utilized in the district, Criterion versus norm referenced assessment, universal screeners and diagnostic assessments, the features of iReady, and the features of DIBELS 8. So why the shift to new assessments? Well, over the course of time, we found that our assessments were giving us data about where our students were failing to meet expectations only after those expectations were already in place. We wanted to know more about where our students were displaying gaps in their learning so that we could close those gaps to better prepare them to meet expectations. So thus the move from a reactive wait to fail model over to a more proactive early warning system. So just to provide you with some background on assessments, there are three categories of assessment that teachers use and rely on to inform their instruction. They are diagnostic, formative, and summative. And the easiest way to distinguish these categories is to think of assessments taking place before learning, those taking place during learning, and those taking place after learning. Just going to click on a video link here that will explain a little bit more.
I chose St. George's University School of Medicine because at the time that I wanted to go in.
Let's compare diagnostic versus formative versus summative. How are they similar? And how are they different? So why should you implement each assessment? Diagnostic assessments will inform teachers of student achievement gaps and other academic abilities. Formative assessments will help teachers recognize when students are stuck during instruction. Summative assessments will measure whether a student has mastered a large quantity of material. When should you implement each assessment? Well, diagnostics are often given the first day of class, mostly before starting a course or a new unit. Formative assessments are administered directly during the teaching process, and summative assessments are given last, at the end of the unit or the end of the period of course. What are some examples of each assessment? Diagnostics can usually be found in the course textbook. Texts usually have pre-course tests. Formative assessments can be as simple as using student questioning techniques. And a summative example can be a class thesis paper. Next, how should you use each assessment? Diagnostic assessments can be used to plan future lessons and to differentiate students into groups. Formative assessments are best used to make teaching decisions on the fly. Should I keep explaining or should I move on? Summative assessments should be used to judge whether or not a student can advance through a course. Right now, I would just like to say thank you for your time and please subscribe to this channel.
So listed here are just a few examples of each type of assessment that our teachers use. So let's look at an example. A topic pretest in math will show a teacher which parts of a topic a student may already have mastery of and which areas might need more support. That would be the diagnostic assessment. As instruction of the topic moves forward, the student's classwork, which would be the formative assessment, shows the progress he is making in these areas. The chapter test, or the summative assessment, will then show the student's level of mastery after instruction of the topic is complete. Now, if the formative assessment throughout the topic shows inadequate progress, the teacher will adjust instruction in an effort to meet the goals of proficiency by the end of the chapter. It's important to note a very critical distinction in assessment. Some assessments are criterion referenced, while others are norm referenced. What does that mean? Well, let's look at criterion referenced assessments first. Think of your family's last trip to an amusement park, where your child may have had to measure himself against a set height to determine whether he could ride a certain ride alone. That is an example of a criterion reference because there was a certain height which was considered proficient. The child must meet a certain height threshold that does not take into account the heights of the other riders. So criterion reference tests compare a student's knowledge against this predetermined standard or cut score or other criteria. And the performance of other students does not affect the score at all. Standardized tests like the NJSLA are criterion reference because they measure a student's proficiency against a grade level standard. There are predetermined cut scores marking levels of proficiency that do not take into account the performance of the student's peers. Importantly, these cut scores do not identify any areas for support that may exist below the grade level standards. So the grade 3 NJSLA will show that a student is not proficient with third grade standards, but it will not show if that lack of proficiency may actually be rooted in a first or second grade standard. Our battery of assessments, which includes Linkit and F&P, along with the state required NJSLA, were all criterion referenced. They measured a student's degree of mastery on a fixed set of standards. Norm referenced assessments, on the other hand, compare a student's proficiency against that of his or her peers. While these assessments may not tell us whether a student is meeting grade level standards, they do tell us whether a student is an outlier amongst his or her peers. These charts illustrate how information from a norm referenced assessment can sometimes seem to conflict with information from a criterion referenced assessment. So in the first chart, we see that the student scored better than 97% of his peers, but still did not meet proficiency because the entire tested group performed below the cut score. In the second chart, the opposite is true. The student achieved proficiency even though he performed better than only 3% of his peers, because the whole testing group achieved proficiency. And this third chart shows a student who performed better than 50% of his peers, but did not meet the cut score. So a student can be considered typical according to the norm referenced measures, but not meeting proficiency when it comes to the criterion referenced measures. One other type of assessment is called a universal screener. I'm going to click the video link that will talk more about what a universal screener does.
Get amazing savings at Lester Glenn Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram during Jeep Adventure Days and Ram Power.
Universal screening is the process of collecting valid and reliable data multiple times a year with all students. Schools do this for two primary reasons. So first, we conduct universal screening in order to identify those students who may be at risk of poor learning outcomes. This is different from a more traditional approach of using a teacher referral process for identifying those students. When we have universal screening data, we can use those data to make that identification. This allows us to identify students earlier so that we can prevent large gaps in learning by providing maybe some extra practice, some really intentional additional instruction right away when learning gaps are really small, so that we can prevent larger learning gaps. The second reason that schools collect universal screening data is to identify needs within their universal tier or tier 1 instruction. When we have data for all students in a grade level, we can look to identify for that entire grade level, if we have more students who need intervention and we have intervention resources to provide, we can provide whole group intervention. This allows us to save those intervention resources for students who most need them, as well as meet the needs of all students in the grade who may need some additional practice with a skill that we expect that they've previously learned. Whole group intervention is a nice way to do something immediately for students while we may be tackling larger tier 1 needs through curriculum adoption or alignment work, other things that schools are doing. We don't have to wait until that work is complete to be impacting students and helping students learn and grow today. Parents sometimes ask why we collect universal screening with all children. I describe it as similar to a well-child checkup. So we take all children to the doctor regularly in order to identify if they're on track with their growing, with their developmental milestones. That way we can provide some early intervention if needed in order to catch a child up really quickly with some skills that they may need some additional support on, and to prevent larger gaps in their development from forming. In academics, we can do the same thing. So with reading, math, and social emotional behavior, we can use great indicators of student need to identify students who may need some additional support now to prevent larger learning gaps in the future.
So to better balance our batteries, since the state required NJSLI is Criterion referenced, we have decided to shift our assessments away from the Criterion referenced assessments, more towards norm referenced ones, in order to determine students who may be at risk or be below grade level in understanding of skills and concepts in both literacy and math. As such, we are moving toward a replacement of the Linkit benchmark assessment at the K-8 level towards an iReady assessment, which is a norm referenced diagnostic assessment. This is going to be given 3 times a year to all students in grades K through 8 in both literacy and mathematics. We're also replacing our Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system, the F&P, with the DIBELS 8th edition, which is a universal screener for early literacy. So I wanted to go over some of the features of iReady. The iReady diagnostic is a computerized test where all questions and testing formats are developmentally appropriate for our earliest learners, even those in kindergarten. It is an adaptive assessment, which means that the difficulty level of questions adjusts depending on a series of correct or incorrect answers. So for example, if a student answers a number of questions incorrect, the level of difficulty in the next questions will reduce. Conversely, if the student answers a series of questions correctly, that difficulty level will increase. And that is how the iReady will find the appropriate level and identify any gaps that may exist in a student's performance. So within a learning progression, this will enable us to identify gaps that exist below the student's current grade level. In addition, families will have access to a performance report, such as a sample that looks something like this one, which will help guide caregivers to providing support at home. More communication regarding how to access these student reports will be forthcoming. The iReady has 2 parts to it. The first is the iReady diagnostic. It's the adaptive test, like I was explaining, and its purpose is not necessarily to give a score for a student, but more to determine how best to support the student learning. Because this is a norm referenced assessment, we're not necessarily looking for that score. We're just looking for areas where we can guide our instruction and drive it more towards the targeted needs of that student. The test can be broken up over several days. So even for our youngest learners, they are okay with taking that test for a few minutes each day. And this past benchmark that recently wrapped up, some kindergarten classes spent about a week giving the test so that it could be broken up. On the iReady instructional side, the instruction is a supplemental platform that provides lessons based on the individual's strengths and areas for growth, which were ascertained through that diagnostic. This is interactive strategic support, which is supplemental to any instruction going on in the classroom. So, for example, during a student's win time, while the teacher is working with a group of students to target their needs, the rest of the class may be working in an iReady platform so that their needs are also being met, even while they are not directly with the teacher. iReady instruction can take place in class or at home, and that is per teacher discretion. I would just caution any parents who are helping their children at home to stay away from guiding their children to answering questions correctly or really helping them with the activities, because as I explained, this is an adaptive assessment and the level of difficulty will adjust based upon a student's correct answers. And so too many correct answers that were not gained independently can lead to flawed scores. Okay, I'm going to show this video link, which will help you better to understand the iReady diagnostic.
Hello, families. Your child has likely recently taken an iReady diagnostic. And in this video, we answer some of the most frequently asked questions we receive from parents and guardians about the diagnostic and its results. How about a quick refresher? What is the iReady diagnostic? Why is my student taking it? And how will it help my student? How should I think about the results? How do I read the For Families report? And lastly, what can I do to help my student? Let's start with the basics. What, why, and how. The iReady diagnostic is an adaptive assessment. As a student answers correctly, the questions get more difficult. As a student answers incorrectly, the questions get easier. This adaptability allows the iReady diagnostic to identify strengths and opportunities for growth of each student. The purpose of the iReady diagnostic is not to give your student a grade. Rather, it's to help teachers determine how best to support their learning. It's helpful to know that the goal is for every student to be performing on or above grade level. This means that students have mastered the skills in their current grade and are prepared to learn more advanced skills. You might wonder, but what if my student is performing below grade level? This situation can happen, and teachers and schools have many strategies and programs to help accelerate your students' learning. Having this information can help you, your student, and the teachers have the right conversations to make the needed progress. You might also wonder, what if my student's score went down or did not show growth? A lower score does not necessarily mean that your child did not learn or that your child lost skills. Scores can be affected by things like stress, distraction, taking the diagnostic in a different place, and receiving help. Teachers take this into account and use the data from iReady as one of many tools to understand your students' unique needs and progress. Many teachers provide families with this report. It's called the For Families report. On this report, the blue bar on the graph indicates how your student performed on the test in relation to their grade level, which is indicated by the green shading. If your student has taken 2 assessments, there will be 2 blue bars. The national norm percentile below the graph lets you know how your student performed in relation to students in the same grade level nationwide. Students have different areas of strength and opportunities for growth. It is important to understand how your student did in more specific learning areas, which are called domains. The domain table shows how your student performed in these domains and helps teachers know where to build on strengths and focus their support. Finally, how can you help your student? First, you can openly discuss these results, celebrate their strengths and progress, and collaborate with them on planning how they will reach their goals. You can also reach out to your student's teacher to get a full picture of your child's progress and learning, as well as suggestions on how you can best support your student at home. If your student uses iReady personalized instruction, review their progress on the student dashboard and discuss their learning together. Visit the iReady Family Center for additional information and helpful guidance and tools to support your student at home. Your involvement in your students' learning is invaluable to their growth and progress. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and thanks for being a part of the iReady family.
Okay, so the second assessment that we have implemented this year is a universal screener called DIBELS, which stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. This is a universal screener which is given to all students in grades K through 2 3 times a year. This assessment will identify students who may be at risk of struggle with learning to read. It will also illustrate the type of help a student may need. The DIBELS assessment is an indicator of early reading skills, which is key to our literacy instruction in the primary grades. It is quick and easy to administer. One piece of feedback teachers gave us on the F&P is that although it provided some very valuable information to their instruction, it did take a lot of instructional time to administer. The DIBELS will also deliver some valuable information, but will take a lot less time to administer. Teacher meets with a student one-on-one. It provides meaningful data, as well as areas for intervention. It is also an approved tool for a dyslexia screener. So to provide some background in reading instruction, this is a list of what is often referred to as the 5 big ideas of early reading literacy. They include phonological awareness, which is how we understand sounds in our spoken language. The alphabetic principle, which is how we associate those sounds with letters. Accuracy and fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, which is the ultimate goal of reading. DIBELS does address all 5 of these key ideas in reading instruction. The DIBELS 8 is divided into several subtests. These include letter naming fluency, phoneme segmentation fluency, which is the segmentation of the individual sounds that make up a word. Nonsense word fluency. This is an important subtest that often goes unnoticed. When you think about how students might tackle longer, more complex multisyllabic words, they are taught to break those words down into syllables. And very often, each one of those syllables is not a true word. They are nonsense words. And so nonsense word fluency is vital to a student's success in decoding. It will also test word reading fluency, oral reading fluency, and in 2nd grade, there is a maze activity, which is often referred to a cloze activity. This is where a teacher presents a passage that will have every 7th word removed. The students will choose between 3 options to fill in that blank, and this will illustrate the student's comprehension of the passage. How does DIBELS help us as educators? First, if children can read words accurately, but they read very slowly, for example, the teacher can provide extra practice in rereading stories and passages to improve the child's reading rate or fluency. The teacher will then monitor this child's progress and make sure that the child continues to receive the extra support or help that is needed. Secondly, the DIBELS can help teachers review scores on DIBELS measures for the whole class to make decisions about how to better prepare their daily reading activities and lessons. Also, DIBELS helps school district staff. By studying scores across grade levels, we can better make decisions about how to best use the resources we have available to us and to make sure that every child is on track to becoming an accurate and fluent reader. So in conclusion, this is a shift that will help us to improve our practices. and we look forward to the positive outcomes in the success of our students. I thank you for your time tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Merrow. We appreciate your time and expertise on these topics. Please continue to join our Parent University sessions. We'll have another one in a couple minutes on preschool. If you check out our scheduled events, we have offerings for the whole K through 12 range through the month of May. So we hope to see you again soon, and a recording of the session will be placed on the district website. Thank you very much.